Today I want to talk about the newspaper for our community and the letters to the editor, and also members' time and how it's documented in the newspaper. So if you have any thoughts or any feedback, please put it in the comments and let me know how you like this video. This is something that I am very interested in because the newspaper is something I've always loved to read. Since I was a little girl, I loved reading the newspaper, especially the letters to the editor section, because that's when you really get to know what people are interested in and are thinking about in a community. So at the board meeting on Saturday, there is members' time at 11 o'clock every board meeting, and that's the only opportunity that members can stand up and ask a question and try to get a response, because you don't always get a response, but try to get a response from the board or from management or one of the directors if it happens to be a question about that. So again, I had talked about in an earlier video that the board does record the meetings. There's a sign that says it right up front, but they do not publish the recordings on a website for members to be able to watch. And that's a concern for me, as I've noted before. So one of the members came up, a resident came up and asked, why in the newspaper does it only say the name of the member who spoke at the board meeting and doesn't give you detail about what they said? Now, this was a fabulous question. So the community manager, Sean, basically responded and said, well, we don't want to misspeak or misstate what a member has said. Now, this person who was speaking, and I call them members because they're not just residents, but if they're a homeowner, they're called a member because they have voting rights. So that's why we call them members here. So this member was advocating for more information to be put in the newspaper to report on what is actually discussed by the members. So she said it might just say, Tracy Lyons talked about leadership. Well, what does that mean? Tracy Lyons talked about, in the last newspaper, a confidential issue that can be not, discussed further. I mean, when you really don't want to tell people things, that's how you record it in a newspaper. So I spoke up and I said from the audience, I said, the meetings are recorded and they're recorded for the editor to review the meetings to write up the newspaper. So for our community manager to state that they don't want to make a mistake and misstate or miscommunicate what a member has said, that's literally what they say is the purpose for our meetings to be recorded, so that the editor of the newspaper can properly record what happened at the meeting, because she puts in the notes about the board meetings and members' time, and she obviously, does the editing of the whole newspaper. So to me, that's a disingenuous response and a total farce and a non-responsive answer to a really legitimate question. Now, if you look at the Hemlock Farms newspaper, we used to have a robust letters to the editor section. And in recent years, I want to say like 3 to 4 years ago, the board of directors recommended to reduce the size of our newspaper and literally take away the most important and interesting parts that I felt, in my opinion, were why I wanted to read the newspaper. The newspaper now is just a reiteration about the manager's report, the board report, the committee reports, and then all of the good things that they want you to know, like recreation activities and news on the clubs in the community. It's the same thing that they send out in the email blasts and Sean's Friday FaceTime. There's no new information now. I feel like I'm on information overload because I attend all of the board meetings and I attend all of the committee meetings, and I look at the blast that we get from Hemlock Farms Communications Department. So the newspaper, by the time I get it, it comes out like the second week of each month about the last month. So the month of January will come out on like February 10th, let's say. So by that time, I'm just like, all right, I already knew all of that. So they reduced the size of the newspaper, which was very upsetting to a lot of the longtime members here because they removed sections that many people appreciated, or at least, the amount of pages where people could talk about things that members really wanted. And they also make it incredibly hard to submit a letter to the editor. So in the bylaws, it talks about letters to the editor and how it has to conform to certain things. So it has to be under 300 words, and it can't be, defamatory, and no ad hominem attacks. So really what it comes down to is the editor has full discretion. And as it's been noted in our OPPI committee, she has all the power. So she can determine what gets printed and what doesn't. So to me, whether something is ad hominem or defamatory is really subjective. And basically, it's very easy for her to reject a letter. And it's my understanding that many people have tried to submit letters to the editor and have them rejected. And you do have almost a week to resubmit because you have to get your letters in by 4 p.m. on Monday following the monthly board meeting. And then she'll give you till about Tuesday the following week to fix your letter and comply, with her requests, because the newspaper is published that Thursday. So she gives you almost a week, or 8 days to resubmit your letter. But the concern that I have is that the newspaper just is a reflection of everybody's happy nowadays. This is all sunshine and rainbows, and it doesn't really tell you what's really going on. Now, of course, that makes sense, because why would they want to talk about the issues? But then that just tells you it's not a real news source. It's just entertainment purposes, because you're not getting the real information. So that's, again, why I'm doing this YouTube channel with these YouTube videos, to give you the real information. So going back to what Sean had, talked about, was just very disingenuous, because the meetings are recorded, and Connie, the editor, has full access to the recordings. That's my understanding, to be able to write up what's discussed at board meetings and what the members discuss. So the fact that it's not put in writing is a huge concern for me, because they don't want the members to know. Once again, they do not want members to know what the issues are in the community. If they posted the recordings of the meetings, you would be able to see, and again, to me, the most important part is members' time, or if the editor of the newspaper put in what this woman suggested, the actual discussion that the members put on record at members' time, you would have more information about what's really discussed, what's really going on, and how management and the board address it and respond to it. Because that's where I have an issue, is the respect given to the members and how members are treated. And I have seen a lot of disrespect over time, particularly what got me very involved in an issue last January. At this time, January of 2025, a woman, a member here, was talking about a lighting issue of a member, talked about another video, that had PPL install a utility pole and then install a street lamp on it, and the street lamp shined through the windows into her house. And I heard her talk about it month after month after month. And I saw the board directors just like roll their eyes and be like, here we are again. And I was like, this is so disrespectful. Why are you treating this woman like this? And management kept trying to censor her. And as soon as she would start talking, our assistant community manager would interrupt her. And then our community manager would also shut her down. And then they would say things to me, which seemed very passive aggressive and also gaslighting, and say, we already discussed this. And the board members, again, mostly men who are older than me, and they would say, let's move on, let's move on. And I'm like, what is going on that you don't want this woman to talk about this to the directors? So that's why I got very heavily involved in this issue, and I drove by her house and I documented on Facebook what was going on with the lighting and let other members know. Now, members have different feelings about that. A lot of members were like, the light should be on because it's an unsafe road. And my feeling is, well, that's public safety's job to determine whether we need lights on our streets, not an individual homeowner, especially when we're supposed to be in a community that cares about the environment and keeps the skies dark around here. So the issue for me was that this woman was being totally disrespected from the moment she had the opportunity to speak. Like I said, she was interrupted by our assistant community manager, and she was tried to be shut down by the community manager. And then the board of directors would just completely ignore her. And I was just like, this is totally inappropriate, totally inexcusable. And so that's what got me in trouble and got me removed. Also, one of the reasons to be removed as the president of the Neighbor to Neighbor Club. But it's an issue for me that they don't want to share information. They don't want members to have access to the recordings. They don't want members to see in the newspaper what is discussed at members' time. And I think we need to call on the board, the management, and the editor of the newspaper to actually do some real journalism here. All right, that's not going to happen. But talk about real issues, with sincerity. They're not talking about real issues with sincerity. And we live here. What is more important than our health and feeling of safety and happiness to live in this community? So for them to just be pandering to people outside of our community because they want to sell more homes, that's a problem for me. And I hope that it's a problem for you too. So let me know in the community, let me know in the comments what you think. And there's a lot more to come. We have a lot of things to discuss because we want to make this community greater. So let's do it together. Thank you.